Okay, let's unpack this. Imagine for a moment any powerhouse you see around you today. Maybe a nation at the peak of its influence, or a seemingly unshakable global corporation, or even just a dominant cultural idea that feels like it's always been there and always will be. It feels permanent, right? Kind of invincible.
Yeah, it absolutely does. That sense of permanence is powerful.
But if history teaches us anything, it's a profoundly different story, isn't it?
Completely different.
Today, we're diving into something truly monumental: the fall of empires. And this isn't just about, dusty dates and forgotten battles.
No, at all.
It's a deep, fascinating, and often chilling study of the profound human and societal shifts involved when power, on the grandest scale imaginable, finally crumbles.
And what's truly captivating here, I think, is discovering how these monumental shifts, spanning centuries and continents, actually reveal strikingly universal patterns.
Patterns in what, exactly?
Well, in power dynamics, in human behavior, and the very nature of societal resilience. We'll be looking at not just what happened, the sequence of events.
Right, the timeline.
Exactly. But perhaps more importantly, why it mattered then, and crucially, why those lessons resonate so strongly now, shaping our modern world in ways we often don't even perceive.
Absolutely. Our source material for this deep dive is, it's a truly insightful and compelling exploration. It's deeply researched, academically grounded,
Very rigorous.
yet presented with such vivid narrative power. It guides us through the final turbulent days of three colossal giants: the Ottoman Empire, the Mughal Empire, and the British Empire.
Three very different contexts, but with fascinating parallels.
Exactly. And we're pulling from rich historical accounts, digging into the often overlooked psychological analyses of those caught, in the maelstrom of change,
The human element.
and meticulously dissecting the cultural aftershocks that continue to reverberate across continents. Our mission today really is to cut through the vast amount of information out there.
To distill it down.
Yeah, to give you those essential aha moments and help you understand not just how these titans crumbled, but what critical, actionable lessons we can extract for our own time about power, change, and, human nature.
It's interesting, when you think about an empire falling, your mind might immediately conjure images of like a sudden, dramatic implosion, a capital sacked, a leader overthrown.
Right, like in the movies.
Exactly, a swift and decisive end. But as our sources reveal, the reality is almost always far more subtle. It's usually a much more protracted and insidious internal decay.
So not a bang, but a whimper. Or maybe a long, slow groan.
Something like that. Think of it less as a sudden cataclysmic explosion and more like a grand ancient tree slowly rotting from the inside out.
Okay, I like that analogy.
Its branches might still appear majestic and full of life for a time, right? Even as its core structure weakens, making it vulnerable to, the slightest storm. We're going to explore this slow internal process of decline through the compelling lens of three incredibly diverse historical examples.
And what incredible, sprawling examples they are. Let's begin our journey with the Ottoman Empire. This was a power that, at its zenith, stretched across three continents.
Just vast. Southeast Europe, North Africa, deep into the Middle East.
Founded all the way back in 1299, it hit its absolute peak under the visionary leadership of Suleiman the Magnificent in the 16th century.
A true golden age for them.
For centuries, it stood as a monumental symbol of immense power, remarkable cultural sophistication, and unparalleled military might. It influenced everything from global trade routes to artistic expression.
A major world player for a very long time.
Yet by the 19th century, this once formidable entity, this beacon of Islamic civilization, earned a rather, ignominious nickname among European powers: the sick man of Europe.
That striking nickname, the sick man of Europe, it wasn't just a casual insult, was it?
No, it really stuck.
It reflected a visibly accelerating decline. Our sources meticulously detail a trio of interconnected factors that fueled its decay. First, rampant internal corruption.
Okay, corruption, how bad are we talking?
We're talking systemic rot. Not just isolated incidents, but something that corroded the state's administrative and financial foundations from within.
Wow.
Second, a string of significant military defeats. These weren't merely lost battles, they were profound indicators of a tangible loss of external power, technological edge, and prestige on the global stage.
So they were falling behind militarily.
Increasingly so. And third, and this is crucial, the relentless pressure of nationalist uprisings.
Right, from within the empire itself.
Exactly. These weren't just scattered rebellions. They were organized movements from the diverse ethnic and religious populations under its long rule, each seeking their own autonomy and breaking away from that imperial mosaic.
The timeline of this protracted decline is truly telling, isn't it? Punctuated by moments that weren't just events, but real psychological turning points.
Absolutely, like the 1683 siege of Vienna.
Ah, yes, Vienna. That failure wasn't merely a lost battle, was it? It felt like more.
Much more. It was a devastating strategic and psychological blow. For centuries, the Ottoman Empire had been this force of relentless expansion, constantly pushing its borders further into Europe.
They seemed unstoppable for a long time.
Vienna represented the high water mark, the gate to further conquest. Its failure marked the definitive end of that long forward momentum.
Imagine the collective psyche of an empire, accustomed to constant victory, suddenly hitting a brick wall like that.
Exactly. That failure wasn't just strategic. It was a profound symbolic blow that resonated throughout the empire. It signaled a fundamental shift from an offensive, conquering power to a more defensive, reactive posture.
It was the first undeniable crack in the facade of invincibility, maybe.
I think that's a fair way to put it. And that monumental failure, it began to force a kind of painful introspection within the Ottoman elite.
Leading to reforms.
Leading to significant but ultimately insufficient efforts like the Tanzimat Reforms, implemented between 1839 and 1876.
Tanzimat? What were they trying to achieve?
Well, these were ambitious, top-down attempts to modernize and centralize the empire. They wanted to adopt European-style institutions, legal codes, administrative practices.
They're trying to catch up, basically.
Essentially, yes, aiming to revitalize the state and its military. But here's the profound paradox our sources highlight. Despite their well-intentioned goals, these reforms often caused significant internal strife and resistance.
How so? You'd think modernization would be welcomed.
You would, but they challenged deeply established orders. They upset powerful traditional religious and military elites. And in trying to create a more cohesive, modern Ottoman state, they inadvertently fueled the very nationalist sentiments they hoped to contain. By emphasizing this new Ottoman identity, they sometimes ironically highlighted existing ethnic and religious differences, accelerating the desire for separate national identities outside the imperial framework.
Wow, so the cure actually made things worse in some ways.
In some critical ways, yes, it added to the internal pressures.
And then the final fatal blow arrived with World War I, right?
Precisely. The empire's ill-fated alignment with the Central Powers, Germany and Austria-Hungary, was a catastrophic gamble. A last desperate attempt, perhaps, to secure its future.
A gamble that didn't pay off.
Not at all. The war utterly drained its last reserves of strength, its dwindling manpower, its already strained resources. By the time the dust settled in 1918, the Ottoman Empire was utterly exhausted.
And the victors moved in.
The victorious Allied powers carved up its vast territories under various mandates and new national boundaries. This led directly to its ultimate disintegration and the formal establishment of the Republic of Turkey in 1923.
Under Mustafa Kemal Ataturk.
Exactly, bringing centuries of imperial rule to a definitive, and for many, a revolutionary end.
Now, when we talk about that insidious internal rot you mentioned, here's a truly astonishing, lesser-known fact from our sources that really crystallized it for me.
Oh, what's that?
Imagine the bustling, vast Ottoman court in its final decades. It apparently boasted over 1,000 bureaucrats and advisors. Sounds impressive, right? A big administrative machine.
Yeah, seems like a lot of people running things.
But the shocking truth, uncovered by historians, is that many of these officials were either illiterate or held their positions purely through favoritism and bribery, not competence.
Illiterate, seriously. Bureaucrats.
1,000 bureaucrats, and a significant number couldn't even read the documents they were supposed to be processing.
Wow.
What does that really tell you about the state of an empire? If its very administrative backbone is compromised at such a fundamental level, it just screams systemic failure, doesn't it?
It absolutely does. And it's far more than just mere inefficiency. That fact paints a vivid picture of a system that had completely devolved.
It wasn't about governing anymore.
No. It was about privilege, patronage, personal gain, overriding any semblance of merit or public service. When the very machinery of governance, intended to manage a sprawling, diverse empire, is staffed by individuals who lack even basic literacy.
Or just got the job through connections.
Right, or hold positions solely through connections. it signals a complete breakdown of capability and accountability. It highlights a critical systemic failure where the empire's ability to adapt to changing times, to innovate, or even to effectively administer its vast territories was profoundly compromised. This internal decay, this prioritization of loyalty over competence, made it incredibly vulnerable.
Vulnerable to internal dissent and external pressures.
Exactly, both.
Okay, from the fading crescent of the Ottomans, let's journey further east, to another tale of immense power and eventual decline, the Mughal Empire. This is a story of incredible splendor that ultimately succumbed to fragmentation.
A very different flavor of empire, but again, that theme of decline.
Founded by Babur in 1526, this empire was a marvel of its time, wasn't it? A vibrant crucible blending sophisticated Persian culture with opulent Indian traditions.
Absolutely, under visionary emperors like Akbar, Shah Jahan.
Who gave us the Taj Mahal.
Indeed, and Aurangzeb. It was renowned for its unparalleled architectural grandeur, its flourishing artistic achievements, and a remarkably centralized, powerful control that unified much of the Indian subcontinent.
Yet, even in its dazzling brilliance, our sources show that cracks, maybe subtle at first, began to emerge, hinting at the instability beneath the surface.
And those subtle cracks steadily widened. Arguably, they began in earnest with the death of Aurangzeb in 1707.
Aurangzeb, he was a powerful ruler, but controversial too, right?
Very much so. While he was undeniably a powerful and expansionist ruler, his long reign was also marked by relentless, costly wars of expansion and a series of religious policies that created significant internal tensions and alienated large segments of the population.
So his death created a vacuum.
Essentially, yes. His death is often identified as the true beginning of a profound decentralization. Without his exceptionally strong and centralized hand, control rapidly weakened.
What happened then?
Regional governors, previously loyal to the throne, and local powers increasingly asserted their autonomy. They effectively started chipping away at the imperial core, leading to a patchwork of independent or semi-independent states within the former Mughal domain.
So the center couldn't hold.
Precisely. That weakening central control, that unraveling of authority, led to devastating consequences. Perhaps most strikingly exemplified in 1739 with the sack of Delhi by Nadir Shah.
Ah, Nadir Shah's invasion, that sounds brutal.
It was. Nadir Shah, the ruthless Persian ruler, invaded, captured, and plundered the Mughal capital Delhi with brutal efficiency.
This wasn't just a military defeat then.
Oh, far from it. It was a devastating psychological blow. It stripped the imperial capital of its immense wealth, its precious crown jewels, literally, including the legendary peacock throne.
They took the peacock throne, wow.
And its very prestige. It was an undeniable, brutal demonstration of the empire's profound vulnerability to external forces. It shook the very foundations of its perceived strength and revealed its impotence to protect its own heartland.
The reverberations must have been felt everywhere.
Throughout the subcontinent, the slow, agonizing decline continued, further exacerbated by growing internal dissent and, crucially, the relentless creeping power of the British East India Company.
Right, the British were increasingly involved by then.
Very much so. The final decisive blow came with the widespread Indian Rebellion of 1857.
Often called the Sepoy Mutiny in older texts.
Exactly. This massive uprising, though ultimately brutally suppressed by the British, served as the ultimate pretext for the British to formally dissolve the Mughal Empire.
And the last emperor.
Bahadur Shah Zafar, the last Mughal emperor, a figure who by then held little real power but immense symbolic weight, was exiled to Burma. This act marked the formal end of a centuries-old dynasty,
Ushering in the era of the British Raj.
ushering in the full ascendancy of direct British imperial rule in India.
There's a lesser-known fact about the Mughal decline that perfectly captures this paradoxical state of lingering grandeur alongside vanishing power.
Oh, yeah.
Our sources describe how, by the late 18th century, the Mughal emperor's actual territory had shrunk dramatically. It was reduced to just a few kilometers around Delhi.
Just a few kilometers for the Emperor of India.
Think about that. A ruler who once commanded a vast subcontinent now effectively controlled only his immediate palace grounds and a few surrounding villages. Yet, incredibly, he still received formal tributes and flattery, held elaborate court rituals, and maintained the title of a shadow emperor.
A shadow emperor. That's quite an image.
It's tragicomic, really.
The irony and tragedy of that situation are truly profound. It's an extreme illustration of maintaining an elaborate, expensive facade of power and legitimacy, even as the real, tangible authority had utterly vanished.
It feels like a collective delusion almost.
It does. This wasn't just an administrative detail. It reveals a deep societal cognitive dissonance, not only within the dwindling court itself, but also among the regional powers who still paid lip service and nominal tributes to the emperor.
Why did they do that?
Perhaps out of habit or fear or maybe a desperate hope that past glory could somehow be willed back into existence. But this performing of power, this collective agreement to maintain the fiction,
ultimately paralyzed any real efforts at adaptation or meaningful reform. The idea of empire persisted long after its substance had completely eroded away.
Fascinating. Okay, now let's turn our attention to an empire that, for many, still feels like living memory. The British Empire.
The big one.
At its staggering height in the early 20th century, it truly was a global behemoth, wasn't it? A colossal structure covering nearly a quarter of the world's landmass.
And governing an astonishing 1/5 of the global population. Just staggering numbers.
This monumental entity was built on the unyielding pillars of vast global trade networks, aggressive colonization, unparalleled industrial strength, and formidable naval power. It truly earned its moniker, the empire on which the sun never set.
For a time, it seemed unshakable.
Yet even the seemingly invincible titan found itself inexorably brought to its knees. Primarily, you argue, by the profound geopolitical shifts of the post-World War II era. Yes, and crucially, mounting increasingly organized colonial resistance movements across its vast territories. The forces of decline were multifaceted, but certain events stand out as undeniable turning points.
Like the partition of India in 1947.
Undeniably. A defining moment of imperial loss, a traumatic severing of the jewel in the crown.
And incredibly violent, too.
Accompanied by immense bloodshed, staggering human cost, and one of history's largest forced migrations. A violent sundering of territories that had been under British control for centuries. This wasn't a neat, orderly handover.
Far from it.
It was a chaotic, tragic, and often horrific withdrawal that signaled the definitive end of a major chapter of British imperial rule.
And the hits just kept coming after that, didn't they?
Wow.
Revealing the empire's diminishing reach, like the 1956 Suez Crisis.
Suez was another stark, very public exposure of Britain's significantly waning geopolitical power and its increasing reliance on the emerging superpowers, particularly the US.
What happened there exactly?
Well, when Britain and France, along with Israel, attempted to regain control of the Suez Canal after Egypt nationalized it, they were ultimately forced to back down.
Why?
Immense pressure from the United States and the Soviet Union, who saw their own global interests at play and didn't support the Anglo-French action.
So Britain couldn't act independently anymore.
Not on that scale, not against US wishes. The crisis dramatically revealed Britain's inability to act as an independent global power without the backing of these new hegemons. It showed its reliance on outdated colonial structures. It was a profoundly humbling moment on the world stage.
Making it clear the old order was truly gone.
Absolutely. And while the empire had been dismantling itself piecemeal for decades through various acts of decolonization.
Giving independence here and there.
Right. The handover of Hong Kong in 1997 served as a highly symbolic and very public event, marking the official, albeit gradual, end of the British Empire.
Hong Kong was the last big piece, wasn't it?
It was the last major overseas territory to be returned, in this case to China. This moment, broadcast globally, was a powerful visual cue that the sun had indeed finally, definitively, set on the vast British Empire. It closed a chapter that had shaped global history for centuries.
Here's what blew me away from our sources about the British Empire, though. You'd think this titan, the empire on which the sun never set, would be utterly blindsided by its decline, right? Projecting this image of eternal strength.
You'd assume so.
But get this. Even in the 1930s, at what appeared to be its peak, British intelligence reports were already predicting the empire's lifespan might not extend beyond 1975.
Really? In the 30s?
Yeah. They weren't surprised. They saw the writing on the wall decades in advance. That just chills me to think about knowing your own end is coming and perhaps being unable to truly stop it, despite all the power.
That internal awareness is truly extraordinary, and it stands in stark contrast to the public illusion of invincibility the empire often cultivated. It suggests that while the outward projection was one of unassailable strength and permanence, there was a quiet, analytical recognition within the highest intelligence and policymaking circles that the underlying conditions were unsustainable.
But they couldn't act on it. Or wouldn't.
Well, that foresight didn't necessarily translate into effective preventative action. Perhaps the sheer scale of the imperial enterprise, coupled with that very cognitive dissonance we discussed earlier,
The denial.
made meaningful reform or early disengagement seem unimaginable, or perhaps just too politically costly. It's a powerful testament to how difficult it can be for powerful entities to truly act on inconvenient truths, even when they know them.
Fascinating stuff, really. As we look at the Ottoman, Mughal, and British empires, certain common threads become strikingly clear in these historical narratives, don't they? Regardless of their unique cultural or political context.
What stands out to you?
Well, internal rot and bureaucratic decay, like we discussed.
Yeah.
Crippling military setbacks and a loss of technological edge. The unstoppable rise of nationalism among diverse populations and persistent, often self-inflicted, economic strain.
Absolutely. These weren't isolated incidents. They were interconnected forces, each amplifying the others, leading to that gradual, often agonizing erosion of power.
And that leads us to a pivotal question, I think. Beyond the mere dates and battlefields, beyond the political boundaries that shifted on maps.
Yeah.
What truly happens when a structure so colossal, so seemingly permanent, begins to crumble from within?
It's far more than just changes on a political map, isn't it? It's about profound, often traumatic shifts in the human experience and collective identity and in the very fabric of society itself.
You're absolutely right. It's easy to look at timelines and think of these as just historical facts, like neat boxes on a chronological chart, distant and impersonal. Exactly.
Yeah.
But our sources emphasize that when an empire falls, it's not just borders that change, it's minds, it's identities. It's the very fabric of society that gets ripped apart, leaving deep and lasting scars.
The fall of empires is not merely a political event. It's a profound psychological trauma and a sociological rupture that impacts generations, both those who ruled and those who were ruled.
This is precisely where the psychological dimension becomes so critical, isn't it?
It really is. Our sources highlight a pervasive cognitive dissonance among elite rulers. They often clung to a powerful illusion of invincibility,
Denying the obvious sign.
denying the unmistakable signs of decline, the economic woes, the military losses, the growing unrest until the very last moments. This self-deception wasn't just a personal failing, it was a fatal flaw for the empire itself.
How so?
It prevented them from undertaking the proactive, necessary reforms that might have mitigated or even averted total collapse. Think back to the Mughal shadow emperor example.
Right. Performing power.
Exactly. It was a societal performance. Everyone, from the emperor to the tributing lords, was complicit in maintaining a fiction. This performing of power, even in its absence, paralyzed any real efforts at adaptation. It's a powerful lesson for any powerful entity, whether a nation, a corporation, or even an individual. Denial of reality can truly be deadly.
And it wasn't just the rulers affected, was it? The vast populations, both former colonial subjects and the citizens of the former imperial powers, struggled immensely to redefine their national identities in the wake of such monumental shifts.
Imagine that challenge.
Think about it. How do you redefine who you are when the very framework of your identity, whether built on imperial power or shaped by colonial subjugation, just dissolves?
It's a complex, painful, and often bloody process of self-discovery and nation-building.
Can you give some examples?
Sure. Consider some of the specific examples our sources provide, which vividly illustrate these post-imperial identity crises. Post-Mughal rule, Pakistan for instance, embarked on a complex and often turbulent search for national unity, grappling with diverse ethnicities and religious interpretations in the glaring absence of a unifying imperial authority.
Trying to build something new from the pieces.
Exactly. Turkey, after the Ottoman collapse, underwent a radical, almost revolutionary secular pivot under Mustafa Kemal Ataturk. A deliberate and often brutal rejection of its imperial caliphate path to forge a new, modern national identity rooted in Western ideals.
A complete break.
A very deliberate one. And in Britain, we observe an ongoing, complex nostalgia for imperial greatness, which continues to impact its current self-perception, its global role, and even its internal political debates today.
That empire state of mind lingers.
These are deep, enduring identity struggles that resonate through generations.
Beyond individual psychology, the social dynamics of collapse are equally profound and often devastating. One incredibly significant impact our sources highlight was class inversions.
What do you mean by that?
Imagine this. Entire social strata, once at the very pinnacle of society, like the Ottoman Turkish aristocrats who had inherited immense wealth, power, and status for centuries, Or the Indian Nawabs, who ruled vast territories under Mughal suzerainty, suddenly found their world utterly inverted. They weren't just losing money, their very identity, their inherited place in society, their entire purpose was ripped away literally overnight.
That must have been
It
shattering.
wasn't a gentle shift, it was a shattering upheaval.
And that kind of abrupt, fundamental social upheaval inevitably causes deep, festering resentment and long-term instability, doesn't it?
You'd imagine so?
When a long-standing social hierarchy is shattered so violently, the displaced elite, or those who benefited from the old system, don't just disappear. They become a source of grievance, leading to prolonged societal instability, sometimes manifesting in intergroup conflict, political extremism, or even attempts to reclaim lost power.
The effects ripple outwards.
The sheer scale of social reordering in such moments is immense, and its effects can reverberate for generations.
And then there's the heartbreaking human cost of mass displacement, a stark consequence of imperial collapse and hasty partitions.
The partition of India comes to mind immediately.
Exactly, a direct and tragic consequence of the British Empire's withdrawal. It stands as a horrifying example of this. We're talking about over 15 million people displaced,
15 million.
forced to abandon their homes, their communities, their livelihoods, fleeing across new, hastily drawn borders that arbitrarily divided families and villages, and the death toll. Over 1 million lives tragically lost.
In the accompanying intercommunal violence and chaos that erupted, it's almost unimaginable.
The numbers are staggering, truly difficult to comprehend. We're talking about human suffering on a scale that's almost impossible to grasp, all stemming directly from the collapse of a system and the messy, violent birth of new nations.
The long-term impact of such an event on the social fabric, on intercommunity relations, on national memory, it cannot be overstated.
No.
Generations are shaped by the trauma of forced migration, communal violence, and the loss of ancestral lands. It creates enduring divisions, legacies of mistrust, and unresolved historical grievances that continue to influence societies decades, even centuries, after the initial collapse.
Those profound internal shifts don't just disappear with the stroke of a pen, do they?
Not at all. They cast long, deep shadows into the present, influencing everything from contemporary politics and foreign relations to cultural identity and everyday interactions.
And this leads us to an important consideration. In our seemingly post-colonial world, how much of the past is truly past?
It's a critical question. Our sources strongly suggest that empires may die, but their ghosts remain.
Ghosts, like lingering influences.
Exactly. The architecture of power, the ways of thinking, the very structures of global influence often persist in subtle, sometimes insidious ways, long after the flags of empire have been lowered and new nations declared.
It's true, and we see it most clearly in what's often termed neocolonialism, right? Where the direct political control is gone, but new forms of influence emerge.
Our sources point to how powerful multinational corporations and global financial institutions like the International Monetary Fund, IMF, and the World Bank can sometimes, perhaps inadvertently or even intentionally, replicate colonial power dynamics.
How so?
Well, they can influence economies and policies in developing nations in ways that echo historical exploitation. For example, through conditional loans that dictate economic policies or resource extraction agreements that don't always benefit the local population, creating new forms of dependency.
So economic leverage instead of direct rule.
That's a critical connection to make, because it's not just abstract influence, it's tangible economic reality. We continue to see it in modern-day resource extraction practices, where multinational corporations, often based in former imperial powers, control vital natural resources in developing nations.
Which can lead to problems.
It can lead to economic dependencies and environmental degradation that strikingly parallel historical colonial relationships, simply under a different guise. The power dynamic, while not overtly political in the traditional sense, can still be heavily skewed.
And then there's the enduring geopolitical influence. Even if the Union Jack isn't flying over a territory anymore, the blueprints of British rule are still remarkably visible.
Like what?
Think about the pervasive influence of the British legal system. It still forms the basis of law in countless former colonies, shaping their judicial processes.
Common law systems around the world.
Exactly. English, the language of the former empire, remains a global lingua franca, a powerful tool for communication and commerce, but also a subtle reminder of its historical dominance. And education frameworks, often modeled directly on British systems, continue to shape schools and universities worldwide. When you connect all these dots, it means that even if the physical empire is gone, its foundational structures are still there, shaping legal systems, educational institutions, and even daily communication across vast swaths of the globe.
It's remarkable persistence, isn't it? These are not merely cultural remnants. They are deep-seated structural legacies that continue to influence how societies are organized, how justice is administered, and how knowledge is disseminated long after the formal empire has ceased to exist.
They're embedded in the fabric.
Deeply embedded in the very fabric of post-colonial nations.
This enduring legacy also deeply permeates pop culture, doesn't it? Offering a fascinating window into how societies process their imperial pasts.
Oh, absolutely. It's captivating how popular media reflects an ongoing fascination with, and sometimes a pointed critique of, these imperial legacies.
Like what kind of examples?
Well, you see it vividly in highly popular TV shows like The Crown. While it focuses on British royalty, it often romanticizes certain aspects of the empire, even as it attempts to critique others, sparking public debate.
Right, it gets people talking.
And then there are critically acclaimed books like William Dalrymple's White Muggles, which explore the complex, often intimate, cross-cultural encounters that defined the Mughal context. These prompt us to reevaluate conventional historical narratives and explore the messy, human side of imperial interactions.
So culture helps us grapple with the past.
These cultural products serve as crucial arenas for processing, romanticizing, or critically engaging with the past. They allow societies to grapple with uncomfortable truths, explore complexities, and sometimes, regrettably, reinforce idealized or sanitized versions of history. They become mirrors.
Mirrors reflecting our origins and identities.
Precisely.
And this leads us directly to the powerful, often volatile role of nationalism and historical revisionism in the present day.
A very potent force.
Our sources highlight how leaders in nations like modern-day Turkey and India frequently invoke the glories of their former empires, the Ottoman and Mughal empires, respectively, to legitimize modern politics, to foster national pride, or sometimes to aggressively fuel nationalist sentiments.
It's a potent and often dangerous political tool.
Why dangerous?
Well, this highlights how history can be selectively remembered, reinterpreted, and even weaponized for political gain. By emphasizing certain narratives of past glory, these leaders can deliberately obscure the complexities, the violence, and the internal contradictions of imperial rule.
Creating a simplified, idealized version.
Exactly. A version of the past that serves present-day political agendas. It's a way of shaping national identity, not necessarily through historical truth, but through a curated, politically convenient narrative.
These persistent echoes, these lingering shadows of empire, they really compel us to question commonly held beliefs about how empires truly fall and what the real multifaceted impact was, both then and now.
They absolutely should.
We often cling to a very simplified, almost cinematic idea of how empires end, don't we? Maybe a single decisive battle or a dramatic sudden collapse in a whirlwind of chaos.
The Bollywood version.
Exactly. But our sources reveal some pretty surprising truths that fundamentally challenge those common assumptions. It's time to debunk some pervasive myths and uncover the often uncomfortable realities.
It's remarkable how pervasive some of these myths are in popular understanding. Let's start with a big one. The myth that empires always fall due to an overwhelming external invasion.
Right, the barbarians at the gates image.
Exactly. Or overwhelming foreign armies conquering the capital in a decisive external blow.
And the truth, as our sources meticulously lay out, is quite different and far more insidious, isn't it?
It is. Most empires, including the three we've explored today, actually collapse primarily due to internal decay.
That internal rot again.
Yes. We're talking about rampant, systemic, bureaucratic corruption that hollowed out the state, profound economic mismanagement that crippled their foundations and impoverished their people, and widespread public disillusionment and internal dissent that slowly but surely eroded loyalty and cohesion among the populace.
So the foundations crumbled from within.
An empire can withstand many external blows if its core is strong, but a rotten core makes it vulnerable to even minor pressures.
This truth powerfully underscores the paramount importance of internal resilience and good governance, doesn't it?
Absolutely. External threats often act as catalysts, revealing weaknesses, but the true vulnerability and the ultimate cause of collapse almost invariably comes from within.
You see this vividly echoed in the Ottoman court's illiterate bureaucrats we talked about, or the Mughal shadow emperor maintaining a facade of power while his authority had evaporated. These were not external forces, but rot at the very core.
An empire that cannot effectively manage its own affairs, maintain its infrastructure, or secure the loyalty of its populace is fundamentally fragile, regardless of how many armies it can field. It's a powerful lesson in the necessity of internal integrity.
Here's another deeply ingrained myth: that colonized nations were largely passive victims, simply enduring imperial rule without significant resistance.
Ah, yes, the passive subject narrative.
This narrative often minimizes or outright ignores the agency and struggle of those subjected to colonial power, painting a picture of resigned submission.
And the truth, as our sources clearly and powerfully demonstrate, is that resistance movements were widespread, constant, and incredibly multifaceted.
But often written out of the history books.
Unfortunately, yes. These struggles for autonomy were often deliberately erased or downplayed in colonial narratives, which preferred to portray a picture of peaceful subjugation and imperial benevolence. But we see resistance everywhere if we look.
Like where?
Well, specific, powerful examples. The Wahhabi Rebellion, a significant religious and political uprising against Ottoman rule in the Arabian Peninsula during the late 18th and early 19th centuries, which fiercely challenged the Sultan's authority directly.
Okay.
The massive and often brutal 1857 uprising in India, which deeply shook British control and forced a fundamental reevaluation of their colonial strategy.
Right.
And the Mau Mau revolt in Kenya in the mid-20th century, a fierce and bloody struggle against British colonial authority. The reality was a constant, multifaceted struggle for autonomy, not passive submission.
So constant pushback.
The colonizer faced continuous, diverse forms of resistance, from armed rebellion to cultural preservation to everyday acts of defiance.
When you put all this together, it makes you wonder about the bigger picture of imperial collapse. Was it ultimately a painful but necessary liberation, finally allowing self-rule and paving the way for innovation and independent national identity? Or did it simply trade one set of problems for another, leaving deep scars, artificial borders, and fueling modern conflicts that continue to destabilize regions today? Our sources present this as a controversial view among scholars, with strong arguments on both sides.
It's a crucial point because it compels us to engage in genuine critical thinking about historical outcomes. It's not black and white.
Definitely not.
Some scholars indeed argue that the collapse of empires, while often violent and chaotic, ultimately created essential opportunities for self-determination, for suppressed cultures and nations to emerge, and for new forms of governance to innovate.
The creative destruction argument, perhaps.
Perhaps. Others, however, contend that the process was so devastating that it left deep, enduring scars, fragmented societies, artificial borders drawn by colonial powers that ignored ethnic realities, and exacerbated ethnic or religious tensions that continue to fuel modern conflicts and instability across former imperial territories.
So there's no easy answer.
It's vital for us, and for you as the listener, to consider these dual perspectives. Recognize the immense complexity and multifaceted nature of historical consequences. It's rarely a simple narrative of good versus evil or pure progress.
That nuanced understanding leads us to another important consideration.
Okay.
How have prominent scholars and theorists attempted to make sense of these complex processes of imperial decline?
Right, the theoretical frameworks.
And what do concrete examples from history tell us about the validity and applicability of their theories? The insights from these thinkers often provide invaluable frameworks for understanding these colossal historical shifts.
Absolutely. Let's delve into some of the expert opinions our sources highlight. First up, the hugely influential Edward Said and his groundbreaking work on post-colonialism.
Said, his concept of Orientalism is famous.
Exactly. Said famously critiqued the deep-seated cultural imperialism embedded in colonial knowledge systems. He argued that the very way the West understood, categorized, and represented the Orient wasn't neutral or objective.
It was a power play.
It was a deliberate construct designed to exert control, justify dominance, and reinforce power hierarchies. And this, he powerfully argued, is still profoundly pervasive today, shaping our perceptions and biases.
So when you truly unpack this, it suggests that cultural biases from imperial eras still deeply shape how we see the world.
And how we think about different cultures and how power dynamics play out even now in subtle, often unconscious ways. Said's work helps us understand that power shapes not just political and economic structures, but also narratives, intellectual frameworks, and even academic disciplines.
The impact is deep.
It demonstrates that the impact of empire is deeply ingrained not only in our institutions, but also in our collective consciousness and the very categories we use to understand the world. It's a powerful and enduring legacy.
Then there's Arnold Toynbee, the renowned historian. His multi-volume A Study of History analyzed the rise and fall of civilizations.
What monumental work.
He held a profound belief, didn't he? that civilizations die not by murder but suicide.
That's his famous line. He saw the decline of great powers not primarily as a consequence of external attack, but as an internal failure, an inability to respond creatively, intelligently, and effectively to the challenges they faced from within.
So back to that internal decay idea.
Toynbee's perspective strongly reinforces the idea that internal decay and a lack of adaptability are paramount. It shifts the focus from external threats to the inherent resilience or lack thereof of a civilization or empire to adapt to its own changing circumstances.
Social, economic, political.
All of it. It's a powerful argument for continuous self-reflection, intellectual flexibility, and the crucial ability to reform from within.
And Jared Diamond, known for his powerful collapse theory, brings a different, often environmental lens to the discussion, right?
Yes, Diamond frequently focuses on factors like environmental mismanagement, the overexploitation of resources leading to ecological degradation.
Like deforestation or soil erosion.
Exactly. And also elite overreach, where ruling elites make decisions that ultimately undermine their long-term viability by concentrating wealth or power, leading to widespread inequality and instability.
So it connects to resource control and governance.
Diamond's work connects these grand historical narratives to fundamental, often overlooked issues of resource control, environmental sustainability, and responsible governance. It reminds us that environmental stewardship and equitable, accountable leadership are not just modern concerns.
They've always been critical.
Historically, they've been critical determinants of long-term societal success or, indeed, failure. His insights force us to consider the often unseen ecological and social foundations that underpin even the mightiest empires.
Finally, Partha Chatterjee and Dipesh Chakrabarty, two prominent post-colonial theorists. They bring us to a fascinating, deeply human aspect, the concept of hybridity and dual consciousness created by empire among the colonized.
Explain that a bit more.
Think about it. Living under imperial rule, people are often forced to navigate constantly between their traditional indigenous culture and the imposed imperial culture. It creates a kind of split identity, a perpetual negotiation. How do you reconcile your own ancestral culture with the imposed one, with its different language, laws, and values? It's a deep, often painful psychological and cultural challenge that leaves a lasting imprint.
This concept is absolutely crucial for understanding the enduring psychological and cultural complexities of living under imperial rule and its long aftermath.
It highlights the internal struggles.
It highlights the profound internal negotiations, adaptations, and often conflicts that individuals and communities experience when their identities are shaped by both indigenous traditions and foreign impositions. It speaks to the ongoing struggle for self-definition in a world still marked by imperial legacies.
To bring these powerful theories to life, let's look at some concrete real-life case studies that vividly illustrate their points. The fall of Constantinople in 1453 is an incredible, almost mythic story in itself.
A major world event.
While it happened long before the Ottoman Empire's own decline, it was the monumental conquest of the Byzantine capital by the Ottomans. Our sources explain that its legacy haunted the Ottomans and influenced their collapse narrative centuries later.
How so? Haunted them.
Well, that's a fascinating, almost ironic point. This historical event, a monumental victory that cemented the Ottoman Empire's status as a global power, became a foundational myth for their empire, a potent symbol of their power, destiny, and divine favor.
Okay, makes sense.
Yet, ironically, as their own empire began to weaken centuries later, the very memory of Constantinople's fall to them might have instilled a subconscious fear, a constant nagging reminder of the fragility of even the greatest capitals and the transience of power.
So it became a kind of historical mirror, reflecting their own potential vulnerabilities back at them.
Exactly, a constant whisper of their own possible end.
Interesting psychological angle.
Another powerful example of complex resistance is the 1857 Indian Rebellion. Our sources describe it not as a simple, unified uprising against the British, but as a multi-pronged resistance.
Meaning?
It involved a complex mix of motivations and participants. From sepoys, the Indian soldiers serving in the British East India Company's army, to various peasant groups, local rulers, and religious figures.
Okay.
They were rising against both the oppressive British rule and, in some cases, the perceived impotence or corruption of residual Mughal structures. It demonstrates a layered struggle for power and justice.
So it wasn't just British versus Indian.
It illustrates the immense complexity and varied motivations within resistance movements that often defy simplistic narratives. It wasn't always a clear-cut fight against a single oppressor. Often, these movements targeted both old forms of power and new ones, reflecting deep-seated grievances against multiple layers of authority and social injustice.
Highlighting the agency of diverse groups.
Absolutely. And here's where it gets truly interesting in terms of lasting impact and unforeseen consequences. The British withdrawal from Palestine in 1948.
A hugely contentious event.
It's framed by our sources as a direct result of imperial fatigue and pressure. A moment when the imperial power, exhausted by war and economic strain, simply couldn't sustain its presence and responsibilities anymore.
They wanted out.
But it didn't just end there, did it? It wasn't a clean break. This hasty and often poorly managed withdrawal directly led to profound, long-term regional instability and conflicts that continue to plague the Middle East today.
Like the Israeli-Palestinian conflict.
Exactly, and broader regional power struggles. The British leaving Palestine might sound like a simple end to a chapter, but it directly created decades of conflict we still tragically witness today.
Absolutely. This case study powerfully highlights how imperial exits, even when intended to reduce the burden on the withdrawing power, can inadvertently create dangerous power vacuums and exacerbate existing ethnic, religious, or political tensions.
Leading to long-lasting consequences.
Profoundly destabilizing and long-lasting consequences for the regions involved. A legacy of, perhaps, irresponsibility that former imperial powers are still grappling with.
These theories and examples really underscore the deep, complex, and often painful impact of empire. But how do different cultures and nations truly reconcile with their imperial pasts? The answers are rarely simple or uniform, are they?
Not at all. That's a crucial question because imperial legacies are far from monolithic. They are remembered, interpreted, and even weaponized very, very differently across the globe.
What one nation celebrates.
Another might condemn as a period of brutal oppression and exploitation. These narratives are constantly shifting and contested.
Can you give examples of these variations?
Sure. Consider the stark contrasts in Turkey regarding the Ottoman era. This period is often romanticized by conservatives who invoke its past glory, its caliphate status, and its vast dominion as a potent source of national pride and religious identity.
Often to legitimize modern politics.
Exactly, and a more traditionalist vision for the country. But it's equally and often fiercely critiqued by secularists who view it as a period of backwardness, stagnation, and religious dominance that desperately needed to be shed to build a modern, progressive, European-oriented state as envisioned by Ataturk.
So a real battle over history.
It highlights the ongoing fundamental political and ideological battles over national identity and how history is continuously used and contested in the present.
And the situation in India regarding the Mughal legacy is equally fascinating and often extremely politically polarizing, isn't it?
Hugely polarizing. Depending on the lens you're looking through, whether it's historical, religious, or political, it's either celebrated as a dazzling cultural zenith.
A period of art, architecture like the Taj Mahal, sophisticated governance.
Right. Or, conversely, it's viewed as an oppressive rule by foreign Muslim invaders who subjugated indigenous Hindi populations, imposed their will, and drained resources.
What's so striking is that people can look at the exact same historical facts and come away with such diametrically opposed conclusions. Seeing a golden age versus a period of oppression, it's fascinating how deeply these different perspectives can be rooted.
And how profoundly they influence present-day politics and national self-image. This directly connects to modern Indian politics and the ongoing process of historical revisionism, where narratives are selectively shaped and reshaped to serve contemporary political agendas, often leading to social division.
A past isn't past, it's an active battleground.
Very much so, a battleground for national identity and political power.
And then there's the UK, the former imperial power itself. How does it remember its empire?
Well, the empire is often remembered with a complex, almost awkward ambivalence. It's either taught in very sanitized formats in schools,
Focusing on the good bits.
focusing almost exclusively on aspects like infrastructure building, exploration, and the civilizing mission, while sidestepping the violence, exploitation, and moral compromises. Or, in many cases, large parts of its colonial history are simply left out of curriculums entirely, creating significant knowledge gaps.
A kind of national amnesia.
There's a palpable discomfort, perhaps. A reluctance to fully confront the darker, more uncomfortable aspects of colonial rule and its enduring consequences. It reflects the profound challenges of confronting a complex and often uncomfortable past for former imperial powers.
A societal negotiation with memory.
And one that is far from concluded.
Now, for a critical analysis, it's important to approach this topic with nuance, isn't it? It would be disingenuous not to acknowledge that even within their inherent flaws and the immense suffering they caused, empires, particularly at their peak, did possess certain strengths that shaped the world.
We have to be balanced. What strengths are highlighted?
Well, they often provided political stability and a degree of order over vast territories, which could lead to periods of relative peace and trade sometimes. We saw incredible cultural fusion, like the Indo-Persian art and magnificent architecture of the Mughals, or the stunning Ottoman architecture, blending diverse influences into unique forms.
True. The cultural exchange could be rich.
And, for better or worse, they often engaged in significant infrastructure development, building roads, railways, ports, administrative centers that, ironically, sometimes facilitated their own leader unraveling by connecting disparate regions.
However, these perceived strengths were inextricably linked to fundamental weaknesses that ultimately led to their collapse, and often to immense human cost.
Such as?
Their highly centralized power structures, while seemingly strong, paradoxically led to fragility. They became incredibly vulnerable to internal rot, the whims of a few powerful individuals, and an inability to adapt to local needs.
Brittle at the core.
And the systematic ethnic, religious, and economic oppression that often characterized imperial rule created deep, simmering, long-term resentment among colonized populations. This fueled the very nationalist movements that would ultimately sow the seeds of their own destruction.
Creating the forces that destroyed them.
And of course, the fundamental economic exploitation that drained colonized lands of their natural resources and labor for the sole benefit of the imperial core was inherently unsustainable and profoundly unjust, creating vast disparities that persist to this day.
And finally, it's absolutely vital to recognize the dangers of romanticizing collapse, isn't it?
Extremely important.
It's easy, from our detached historical vantage point, to look back at the fall of empires as a dramatic, almost noble, or even liberating event. But as our sources powerfully warn, this romanticization can be incredibly dangerous and misleading in the present day.
This raises an important question. While we meticulously analyze collapse, we must also be critically aware of how we narrate it and for what purpose.
Why is that so critical?
Romanticizing the collapse can inadvertently fuel aggressive nationalism and dangerous historical revisionism. It might focus only on perceived injustices or idealized past glories without acknowledging the full, messy reality.
Ignoring the downsides.
It often oversimplifies what were incredibly complex and violent transitions, erasing the immense suffering, the mass displacement, and the nuanced, often tragic stories of the marginalized populations caught in the brutal crossfire. It's crucial to acknowledge the profound, often horrific, human cost that accompanies the end of an empire.
So after this extensive deep dive, what does this all mean for us today? The clearer it becomes. Empires may crumble, their flags may be lowered, but their psychological architectures endure.
That's a powerful phrase.
Think about it. The very languages we speak, the often arbitrary borders we inherit that divide communities, the subtle prejudices we carry, they all bear indelible imperial fingerprints. The ghosts of empires are very much still with us,
Shaping our world in ways we might not even realize.
influencing everything from global politics to local identities.
When you connect all these dots and look at the bigger picture, the most profound and perhaps chilling lesson from the last days of these giants is this. Power, no matter how immense or seemingly permanent, is inherently transient.
Nothing lasts forever.
And those who ignore the growing cracks within, who cling desperately to an illusion of invincibility, are inevitably doomed to collapse, often from their own hubris, arrogance, and denial. In a world grappling with persistent global inequality, escalating climate crises, and resurgent political extremism, studying the last days of empire offers a chilling yet vital reminder. Collapse is not a sudden cataclysmic event.
It creeps in.
It creeps in slowly, insidiously, with denial, with greed, with betrayal, and ultimately with the dangerous silence of inaction.
This deep dive leaves us with so much to consider, doesn't it? Can today's global powers truly learn from these imperial downfalls? Are they susceptible to similar internal weaknesses, to the same hubris and cognitive dissonance that plagued empires past, leading them down a path of slow decay?
That's the million-dollar question.
And what about the rapidly emerging digital empires we see rising today? The colossal tech companies that exert unprecedented control over information, commerce, and even our daily lives. Are they, too, repeating the same patterns of centralized power, potential exploitation, and eventual fragility that history warns us about?
A fascinating and slightly terrifying thought.
perhaps most importantly, what psychological resilience is required for individuals and societies to not just survive systemic collapse, but to adapt and rebuild in the face of radical, profound, and often painful change.
What does history teach us about adapting?
Something to mull over until our next deep dive.